It started as a quiet afternoon, just another day for a man filming in a public space, when suddenly things took a surprising turn. A police officer approached, claiming the man was on private property and had to leave immediately. Confused, the man calmly explained that he was on public land, well within his rights. But instead of resolving the situation peacefully, the officer grew more insistent, even calling for backup. Tension built as the man stood his ground, politely asking for clarification, while the officer appeared increasingly agitated. People nearby began to watch as the situation escalated. What started as a simple misunderstanding quickly became a heated confrontation about rights, authority, and accountability. The question on everyone's mind was, how far would this go? By the end, what unfolded left both the man and the viewers questioning the boundaries of law enforcement. Stay tuned, it only gets crazier from here. As the officer's backup arrived, the man remained calm, standing firm on what he believed to be his rights. "This is public property," he repeated, his voice steady but firm. Meanwhile, the officer seemed determined to prove otherwise, pointing toward a nearby sign that was barely visible and ambiguous at best. A small crowd began to gather, their curiosity sparked by the escalating standoff. Some quietly whispered, while others recorded on their phones, unsure of what might happen next. The man, clearly familiar with the laws regarding public spaces, asked the officer to clarify the exact rules he was supposedly breaking. But instead of offering a clear explanation, the officer deflected, becoming more assertive. Tension hung heavy in the air as it became clear that neither side was willing to back down easily. The crowd grew larger, their phones capturing every second. Everyone wondered what would happen next. The officer's backup began questioning the man as well, their voices firm but still avoiding direct answers to his questions. "We've asked you to leave. If you don't comply, there will be consequences," one of them said, a tone of authority layered with frustration. The man, still calm but visibly uneasy, asked for clarification again. "What law am I breaking? Can you show me the statute?" He pressed, trying to keep the conversation civil while holding his ground. Meanwhile, bystanders started to weigh in, some defending the man's right to be there, others uncertain about the situation. "He's not doing anything wrong," one voice said from the crowd, while another muttered, "Why doesn't he just leave?" The tension began to ripple through the onlookers as the scene unfolded. All the while, the man's camera kept recording, capturing every word, every gesture. Was this a misunderstanding, or something deeper? The officers started closing the distance, their postures more rigid now as they exchanged glances, silently deciding their next move. The man, feeling the weight of the moment, adjusted his camera slightly, ensuring everything stayed in frame. "I'm just exercising my rights. I'm not causing trouble," he said, his voice steady but laced with the tension of the standoff. One officer stepped forward, his hand hovering near his belt, while another began speaking into a radio. The crowd was growing restless, murmurs turning into audible gasps as the situation escalated. "Why is this going so far?" someone said from the back. A few stepped closer, their phones raised to record what might happen next. The man stayed rooted, refusing to be intimidated, but the pressure was mounting. Every second felt heavier than the last. Then the officer issued one final warning. The air was electric, and everyone held their breath. What would happen now? Just as it seemed the officer was about to take action, a surprising voice broke through the tension. A bystander who claimed to have witnessed similar encounters in this area before. "They've done this before," the person called out, stepping forward cautiously. "This spot is public property. They know it, but they hope people don't." The crowd turned toward the new speaker, their curiosity sparking a shift in the energy. The man at the center of it all glanced at the bystander, unsure if this would help or complicate things further. The officers hesitated for a brief moment, exchanging another glance, this time less confident. But instead of de-escalating, they doubled down. "You need to leave now, or we'll take you in," one officer said firmly, his tone unyielding. Meanwhile, murmurs in the crowd grew louder, with some openly questioning the officer's actions. The man stood his ground, his resolve unshaken, as the situation edged closer to a boiling point. What had started as a quiet afternoon was now spiraling into something much larger. As tensions reached their peak, the officer stepped closer, appearing ready to enforce his final warning. But before he could act, the man calmly reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I thought this might happen," he said, unfolding it and holding it up for everyone to see. It was a printed map from the city's public records office, clearly marking the area as public property. The crowd leaned in, some audibly gasping as the officers glanced at the map. For a moment, the lead officer froze, his authority visibly shaken. He called over one of his colleagues, who studied the paper with a furrowed brow. After a tense silence, the officer stepped back and mumbled something into his radio. The man stayed quiet, letting the weight of the moment sink in. But just as it seemed the conflict was resolved, one officer made a final attempt to save face. "You're lucky we're letting you off this time," he said sharply, as if to regain control. The crowd, now emboldened, began questioning their actions, and the officers quickly retreated to their vehicles. The man stood there, a mix of relief and disbelief, as the onlookers applauded his determination. But as the police cars drove away, the bystander who had spoken up earlier approached him with a warning. "You might have won today, but this isn't the last time they'll try this. Be ready." The man nodded, realizing this small victory was just one part of a larger battle. As the crowd began to disperse, the man took a moment to reflect on what had just happened. He knew standing up for his rights had been the right thing to do, but it wasn't without its risks. The bystander's warning echoed in his mind, reminding him that this likely wouldn't be the last time his resolve would be tested. He turned back to his camera, grateful that everything had been recorded, not just for his own protection, but as a way to show others the importance of knowing and defending their rights. The people who had gathered started thanking him, expressing their admiration for how calmly and respectfully he had handled the situation. As he packed up his belongings and walked away, he felt a sense of quiet victory. While the day had been anything but ordinary, it left him with a renewed purpose: to stay vigilant and continue advocating for fairness and accountability.